Hey guys, Chris from Propel here, and today we're going to be introducing the Riese Muller Packster 70. Now, normally I would be probably at Riese Muller's headquarters in Muttal, Germany, like I've done before to introduce new bikes, or maybe at Eurobike in Germany. But given the situation, it's not really so feasible to travel there. So I'm going to do my best to introduce these new Riese Muller models to you, which are just introduced September 1st, 2020, and just kind of explain them, what I know so far. Once we get the bikes in the shop, we're going to do more detailed reviews, but I should be able to give you a pretty good general idea of what's going on with the bikes now and be able to show you them as much as possible. But if you have any questions or comments, maybe you have previous experience with the other versions of these bikes, you can chime in. That would be cool. Packster 70. Now, Riese Muller has had a couple different versions of the Packster. They've had the Packster 60, which was initially introduced, I think, in around 2017. It's actually like somewhat around the time that Riese Muller was introduced into the US. So they started largely with the Load, which is their full suspension cargo bike, one of my personal favorite bikes, and that's full suspension, but they found the need that people were looking for something a little bit different, maybe a little bit larger capacity, and maybe didn't really feel like they needed that full suspension, so they introduced the Packster. So they had the Packster 60, the Packster 80. Later they introduced the Packster 40, which is intended to kind of be the same size as a standard bike, but just have like some cargo up front, so it's like a bike with a trunk, whereas the 60 and the 70 largely are like serious cargo bikes. Those numbers, by the way, just annotate how long the bed of the cargo space is. So the 40 is 40 centimeters long, the 60 centimeters long, and the 80 is 80 centimeters long. So they actually replaced the 60 and the 80 with just the 70. They figure, let's kind of cut the difference there and make one model and just make it really special. And so that's what they got. I'm pretty excited about it. I think they really brought a lot of innovation to this particular model. We have a decent amount of experience working with a variety of front loader cargo bikes. As I said, the Load is a personal favorite, and the Packster has been very popular for them as well. But I think these new features are really going to secure the spot of that model to be even more special. So some of the notable differences between the new Packster and the previous version: one, like many of the other models in Riese Muller's lineup, they introduced it with the new motor. So more specifically on this bike, it's the Bosch Cargo Line motor. Now this motor has 85 Newton meters of torque, which is quite a bit of power. The entry version of the Bosch motor has 40 Newton meters of torque, so that 85 Newton meters is a pretty big jump from there. Previous versions of the Packster went up to 75 Newton meters of torque on the CX motor, but this new version has a little bit extra, and I think a lot of people are really going to appreciate that. The new motor is also a little bit smaller, so they're able to integrate it into the frame a bit more, and it performs a little bit better when pedaling without power, so I think some people will enjoy that, particularly if you want to ride the bike without power, which maybe you might not find yourself doing too much, but there are certainly some people that would like that, and some scenarios where you might find that that's feasible. For example, myself personally, sometimes I'll be riding on the beach path or something like that, or an area where it's a bit more crowded, and I find like I don't actually need this assistance. I could just kind of pedal along without it, and sometimes I'll do that. So really nicely integrated motor. They did something pretty unique with the batteries, where instead of the standard power packs that they had externally mounted on the previous Packster 60 and 80, they went with power tube batteries, and they took them and they put them in the base frame of the bed of the cargo bay there, and they did the standard version has a 500 watt-hour power tube, but you can get up to two 625 watt-hour power tube batteries. So it's 1,250 watt-hours of power, which is the largest capacity that you can get in the Bosch lineup. And because they're mounted so low, My theory is, again, I haven't ridden this bike, but my theory is having that center of gravity super low and actually having it in the bed of the cargo bay makes a lot of sense. And it also helps that if you're ever riding the bike without any cargo, it helps to even that weight out a little bit, because you as a rider are a little bit further back, so having the batteries up front, balancing the weight on the front wheel makes a lot of sense. They actually introduced this idea to me in some ways when they originally introduced the Nevo, which is their low step bike, and they took that bike and they put the battery a little closer to the front wheel, and they said, actually, we tested a bunch of different configurations, and actually we found that the bike actually handles better with a little bit of weight on the front wheel, which I was very interested to hear, and I found that to be the case as well. So it's cool that they did that setup. Some things to note about the cargo bay area, those batteries specifically. To my understanding, it's not possible to retrofit different battery configurations. So if you wanted 2 batteries, you should get it initially with those 2 batteries. The shop you work with, or if you work with us, there might be a way that you can figure something out. You get it with 2, and you can maybe upgrade in the future. Like, the shop keeps one of the batteries. I don't want to put any words in any other shop's mouth, but that's something that we've considered or explored in the past. So it's something to consider. Maybe you have like a small upcharge for the capacity to carry 2 batteries, but maybe you're not paying fully for that. You might also wonder, if there's 2 batteries in the center and you only have one of them, will the balance be off a little bit? That's actually something I was considering with their Homage. The new Homage has dual integrated batteries, one on either side of the down tube, which is really pretty awesome design. And I was talking with some of the team at Riese Muller about, like, does it handle weird if you have just one? Is it the balance off a little bit? And because of the way that it's positioned, apparently it doesn't make all that much of a difference. So that's something to consider. So the motor and the battery are definitely notable differences between the previous version, but I think probably most notable is just the overall frame design, the way that they've redesigned the box. They're using this new EPP box, which some other manufacturers have used before. This material is largely used in the automotive manufacturing field, and now they're introducing it. So they have this EPP box with a center reinforcement as well as a top reinforcement. So it's really strong, but still pretty lightweight, which is pretty cool. And there's all sorts of different options for that. So you can have it set up with the standard 2-child seat carry system in the back is an option. Now you can have a 3rd seat in the front with the glove box or the footwell, similar to what we found on the Load and, previously just the Load 75, but then it was also introduced to the Load 60, and it makes it a little bit easier if kids' feet are a little bit longer. It makes it easier for them to sit in a normal posture, but while still keeping the center of gravity really low. So because those seats are lower and then their feet just go down lower, the lower the center of gravity, by the way, it just makes the handling of the bike much easier. And so it's a nice design choice that they made there. Apparently there's also a baby seat attachment in the front there, so you can do a baby seat and 2 kids in the back. You can do that with the 3rd seat in the front. So say, for example, you're starting out that you're going to have the baby seat and the 2 kids in the back, and then eventually you might evolve to having just the 3 seats and pull the baby seat out. You can't use that 3rd seat with the baby seat in there. So they have that set up. Some other things, you can like add a lock to the glove box on the floor there. So that's a nice little improvement from the previous version. And then you have some other things like different covers for it. So you have like a Torno type of soft cover for the top. You can do a hard cover on the top as well as a rain cover for the kids inside, which probably be pretty popular in a lot of regions for people that want to carry their kids throughout different seasons and different weather conditions. Previously they had the wood box, and then they had they went to like a plastic composite material, but they're kind of heavy, and I don't know if they provided the same level of safety reinforcement that this new box does, so I respect the improvements that they made there. And then Getting into the rest of the bike, the frame is really well integrated. They have those integrated batteries, and the design of it, I think, looks really nice. They're still continuing to have the different belt drive options, but one of the other things before I get into the different drivetrains, with some important details and updates there, they now have an automatic one, but the steering on the bike is different. So previously on the Packster, you had a rod steering, and you still have the rod steering on the load, but you have now on the Packster, you have cable steering. And apparently the cable steering does a couple different things. One is it allows you to have a bit of a larger turning radius. So now you can almost pretty much lock the wheel out all the way in either position. So you can almost have it set up in like a 90-degree angle there on either direction, 90 or 180, however you want to look at it. Whereas, maybe with the standard arm steering, you might be a little bit more limited to actually like how far you can go. And then it might improve your turning radius, not so much when you're riding, but more so when you're maneuvering the bike in some tight situations, you want to do a turnaround, that sort of thing. Because you can't really ride with your steering all the way in that direction like that. But other things, the steering, apparently it's supposed to make it a little bit more responsive as well. And I have some experience riding other bikes with cable steering. It is really nice. It's a bit of a different feel to it, but I think it's a nice improvement for this particular bike. So that's another change that they made to the platform overall. You have this riser stem on there, which it's just made to make it a little easier to fit different rider heights. So you can just basically ride the handlebars up and down depending on what, if you want them to be up a little bit higher, maybe put you in a little bit more upright position, or if you're taller, you might kind of need that. Even if you don't want to put in an upright position, you just want the bars to be a little bit higher up or lower if you're a shorter rider, or if you want to ride a little bit more sporty. Because, keep in mind, if you basically put the bars a little bit lower, you're going to sit a little bit more forward. It's just proportionally where your handlebars are, compared to your saddle. So if your saddle's up a little bit higher, you're going to be leaning forward, and it's going to put you in a little bit more sporty, a little bit more aerodynamic position. If you're sitting very upright, then you're not as aerodynamic, but you maybe might be more comfortable. My general recommendation is to go somewhere in the middle. If you go very upright, you might not have as much control over the bike, whereas if you're sitting a little bit further forward, you'll have a little bit more weight on your handlebars and give you a little bit better control. And that's particularly important on a bike like this, like a cargo bike, where you have a little bit more to handle. I mean, this happens a lot when people are introduced to these bikes and they say, wow, that thing, I can't imagine steering it. It's actually pretty easy. It's a lot easier than most people think, and handling weight on these type of bikes is very easy because the way that the weight is much lower, it keeps the center of gravity really low. So I think that you'd be surprised in how easy it is actually to operate these. And I mean, I made a bunch of we made a bunch of videos of like riding around the city, and I feel very comfortable riding this even in crowded traffic, that sort of thing. And granted, I've been riding a little bit longer, but I find that it usually takes people not long at all to really get comfortable on this type of bike. So, some other things that people might find, that having the kids in front of you, being able to see them and stuff like that, is one of the advantages of having this style bike, a bucket bike, or Bakfiet as it's called in other countries. And yeah, so I think it's really cool. I think that I'm a big fan of what they've done with it. Some other details I'll get into. We talked a bit about the frame. It's available in 3 different colors. So it's available in red, dark gray color, as well as white. So, pretty simple, but actually a little bit more options and colors than the previous version. I guess that, makes it a little bit easier if that they went from the 60 to the 80 and just the 70. As you go a little bit narrower, you can potentially go a little bit deeper with the options, which I think that some people might enjoy there, having more choices there. And Then we get into the drivetrain. I think that this is an important topic to discuss. And as I said before, they have an automatic version. As you guys might have seen other videos I've made about this Enviolo automatic transmission. I'm really pretty excited about it. I think it's a great drivetrain. It's not for everybody. I think it's a little bit polarizing. Some people love it, some people hate it. But for a lot of people, the idea of not worrying about shifting the gears and just riding and pedaling is kind of nice, particularly in America where people are just not as comfortable riding a bike, like not as many people have experience riding a bike. You know, I think that a lot of people, they just want to get on, enjoy, not worry about shifting gears, just like worry about their cargo, the kids, you know, which is probably the most common cargo that people are carrying, and worry about your surroundings and just staying safe, as opposed to worrying about like what gear you're in. And granted, I know a lot of people, including myself, shifting gears kind of comes second nature, but that's not the truth for everybody. I mean, also thinking about that, yeah, other places people might have grown up on bikes and been more comfortable and they've like ridden their whole lives. That's not the case for a lot of people. It's also pretty common in a lot of places that manual transmissions on cars are very common. It's a funny thing, like we went to Europe recently. We rented a car, Tara and a videographer, and she was very surprised that so many of these cars had manual transmission, and she said, well, they don't warn you that they, you know, have a manual transmission? I said, no, like this is just what it is here. It's a lot more common. And so I think that gives you a general pulse of like how it is in America. So, you know, some people that might be watching this from international places or whatever, you know, other places outside of the US, you know, that's a thing, and I think that's also probably one of the reasons why even just the standard Vario transmission is very popular for us. Just really easy to operate, and it's also available that way as well. I think some people might appreciate that if you want a little bit more control, you want to be a little bit more sporty, you can still have that same continually variable transmission that's available on the automatic version, but you can control it manually just by twisting it with your grip. And I should also note, I mentioned the motor before as the cargo line. Now, the Packster 70 is not available in the high-speed version. If you wanted this style bike in high speed, I would recommend looking at the Load 60 or the Load 75, depending on what sort of size constraints that you have. But I think for this bike, the standard cargo line motor is very fitting, plenty of power. But getting back to the drivetrain, so you have the automatic version, which is really like their top spec, fully automatic. You can do some manual override, which is, it would still be electronically shifted, but it effectively acts as if there's 8 gears available. So that's kind of a cool setup. Now the Vario automatic is available with the belt drive, comes standard with the belt drive, as well as the Vario, and which is just the manual version. And the touring version, which comes with the derailleur and cassette similar to the mountain bike, is really for somebody if they want something a little bit less expensive, they want that sporty drivetrain, they want the like faster shifting, and they don't mind the additional maintenance that comes with that traditional derailleur drivetrain. Some other details to mention, it seems to be the overall direction that a lot of the products in the Riese Müller are coming, that they have similar options to them. Like one of the options, for example, is GX. GX is like kind of like grand crossover. It's meant to be able to ride the bike on or off-road. So you have these kind of slightly more off-road tires and different pedals and that sort of thing. So that's the GX version. So if you wanted to ride primarily off-road, you might find that that system works better for you. I should note that the GX tires don't have as much puncture protection, so if you did want to opt for that, it might make sense to maybe take some additional measures for puncture protection. From our side, what we generally recommend is these Tannis tire liners, and we do that in-house, and I find that that really helps a lot. And those Tannis tire liners generally offer even better protection than the standard tires that come on it, which is the Supermoto X in the rear and a Big Ben Plus in the front. I mean, in theory, if you wanted to, you could add them to the existing tires to get even more puncture protection. But in most scenarios, I don't think that that's really so necessary. Some other details I'd like to go over, that there's some different rack options for it. You can get either the standard rack, or you could opt for a kind of slightly more streamlined pannier rack in the rear. You also have an option for the front carrier where you have this cargo carry system, which gives you these like removable panels, which makes it a little bit easier to carry something flat on the bed. So if you wanted to go with the cargo carry system, that will give you a little bit more flexibility for just carrying cargo, but it's not really so ideal for carrying kids there. You can also opt for just no accessories in the cargo area. It would just give you a box, but no child seats there. And when you opt for the standard cargo box, you can have two different options for the top. You can either do a flat box cover or a high box cover. The standard flat box will give you, I think, 240 liters of space to carry there. But if you go with the high top, it gets up to 350 liters of space, so an additional 90 liters. It's pretty significant. Some other details to consider as well would be the display. So for the non-electric shifting version, you have 3 different display options. You can go with the standard Intuvia display. You can opt to upgrade to the smartphone display, which is the smartphone hub, which uses the Kobe app. And then they have a new display available, which is available for most of the new Riese Muller bikes, and probably my favorite display. I don't have too much personal experience with it, but have experience with the previous version, and the feature set on it, I just feel like I'm more inclined to want to go in that direction, and that's called the Nyon. The Nyon has GPS, it has phone connectivity, and you have all sorts of health features, and we'll have a video going into more of the details on the Nyon display, but that's the general gist. It's just improving upon the Kiox display, which is available, which does now have turn-by-turn directions. This is a new introduction with the recent update there, but the Nyon has an actual map there. It's a little bit larger than the Kiox display, which is something that sometimes people complain about a little bit if your vision is not as great, or you just want better, a larger screen to look at. The Nyon will bring you that. So that's a really nice feature there as well. Another option available for the bike is you can either stick with the more standard handlebars and saddle, or you can go for the comfort setup. It gives you a little bit more swept back handlebars with a bit more of a cushy saddle. Now, the one thing I should note is that the more cushion you have in the saddle, it might not be as ideal for super long rides, but I think some of that stuff's a little bit more of a personal preference, and it might take some time to figure out what exactly works for you. But I think for the most part, all the parts that Riese Muller specs out of the box really work pretty well. There's a new thing for them, which they have this performance upgrade, and I guess in theory, maybe if they had the option to go with high speed, that these upgraded parts might be standard on the high speed bike, but basically they have the standard like Tektro brakes and the standard e-bike mini headlight and some of these other details, and then if you go for the performance upgrade package, you get the upgraded headlight. So you go to the Supernova M99, and then you'll have a brake light on the bike along with the TRP upgraded brakes. So if you want just kind of the best options available, I'd say opt for that performance package. Not a bad way to go. And it's kind of getting more into that like automotive type of specification, which is pretty cool. And the performance upgrade also includes a suspension seat post, but you might find that maybe, hey, I'm not going to be riding that fast and I don't really need the extra lighting and everything like that, and you might just want to do a suspension seat post. That's certainly an option as well. You can really add that on pretty much any bike, so that's something good to consider if you're thinking that maybe I don't need all the performance stuff, I just want a little bit more comfort with the suspension post. Well, a couple other things I'd just like to note about the bike is availability. I'm making this video, it should launch somewhere around beginning of September. but the initial builds I think are going to be sometime like end of November. Obviously that stuff's subject to change, so we might not end up seeing these really in the shop till the end of the year. I'm hoping that we can get one into the shop a little bit earlier to do like a proper full-on review and some additional footage and that sort of thing, and maybe give people an opportunity to test out. But I think this bike is really nice. It's going to be tough to decide whether this bike's going to get me to pull away from the load, but I think the load's still going to be my favorite with full suspension, but the Packster is really looking pretty compelling. I do also really like high speed, so that's kind of a consideration. So I think from my side, I'm probably going to continue to stick with the load, but I can still definitely find myself riding around town with the Packster. And we'll see how Tara likes sitting in it and filming. We'll definitely have to try that one out as well. But as I said, they're going to build kind of end of November or somewhere around there. Maybe it'll be built a little bit later, I don't know, and it might be different for different markets. It all depends. The way that Riese Muller builds their bikes, they use a just-in-time inventory system, so they basically build the bikes to order. And managing all the logistics around that, all the parts, motors, drivetrain, etc., it can be pretty challenging, but they do a pretty good job at it. And fortunately, even through this challenging time of the pandemic, they've been able to kind of keep things pretty consistent, and I got to appreciate that. And I think that says a lot about just the way that they're set up and maybe their relationships with their vendors, etc. They're pretty dialed in, if you ask me. So the bike will be built around then, but some of the accessories might be a little bit later. I think the third child seat, the hard box cover, and some of these other options like the baby seat attachment is going to be probably sometime early next year. Some of them might even get pushed out to like February or March. So that's something to consider. But I think, if you work with us or your dealer to be able to kind of sort out like what maybe you get some options now and get some options later. I don't know. So just figure that out. But if you have any questions, comments, just leave them below. If you're interested in getting one of these, you can reach out to us. We'll be happy to help. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the future video. And definitely stay tuned for more videos about Riese Muller and just e-bikes in general. Well, see you soon.